yeah, back to the Africa story. We need to see where we came from, and the best window we have into that is the modern native living people, right? There's a few of these tribes left, and we went to Tanzania and Uganda, and we spent almost 3 weeks, learning from them, hunting with them, eating with them. The Hadza were very interesting. They are a famous group because they still go out and hunt and gather. They are out there with their bows and arrows, and they're getting food each day, and that's all they do. And the women can dig up some tubers or find some plants, but the men are out there hunting, and we went on the hunt with them, and we got a couple animals, and they brought them back, and they opened them up, and they had their little tools, and they did not wash their hands. They did not sterilize anything. They weren't wearing masks. They weren't using gloves. They were just, one with nature, one with the dirt. And we got to eat. We had a little dik-dik. It's a small deer-like animal, and they opened it up for us. We ate the liver raw. They cut it up. There was all kinds of weird stuff going on, intestinal things and different things in the large intestine and small intestine, and greens and browns, and we were just eating all of them. It was just part of it. The experience was to eat this raw liver, and then they cooked everything for us, and we ate some more of the animal, and we ended up eating the brain as well, which was really tasty. Actually, it just tastes like nothing. It was like this pudding. And so that's just how they live, and these are the healthy people. I mean, this particular group was exposed to a lot of tourists, and they got a lot of treats and snacks, and they had kind of like messed up teeth, and it could be partly because all this fluoride and in the water. There's different theories you can read about, but even despite having tons of snacks and treats that tourists would bring, they're very healthy, and they just sort of live long and die.
Yeah,
and that's kind of the story. Yeah.
I think something that was really interesting when you guys were talking about your experience with the Hadza and the Maasai and the various tribes that you both visited was the kind of contrast between coming from the same sort of people living within the city to the actual tribes and how they live themselves, and just the health disparity difference.
Yeah, that was the main takeaway. That was a story that I saw. These people were super healthy. The older generations lived way longer, and they would always tell stories, each group we were with, about how the new generations aren't living as long. They're getting sick. They're getting joint problems and problems like type 2 diabetes, maybe if they really, move to the city or adopt a Western life. And when they stuck to their native diet, they didn't have these. And it was striking because they couldn't quite put it together, though. Some of the people, like the Maasai elder we talked to, he's like, didn't trust foods that lasted a long time, and he didn't trust these new oils, so he didn't know why. This guy he's not reading the literature. He's not listening to Peak Human. He's just knows that it's like, well, why would he use this oil that's in a jug, or why do we want to use this oil or flour that can sit on a shelf forever when we traditionally eat foods that will spoil, and that are, it spoils for a reason. I mean, you should choose your foods based on how long, how short a time they would spoil in, because that means it's fresh and probably nutritious. I mean, it's not like this hard and fast rule, but it is a very good indicator. Is if your food is going to go bad soon, that means it's fresh and nutritious and it's good for you. So they kind of figured this out, but some of the people couldn't quite figure out the connection, and this kind of Western medicine propaganda has anti-meat, propaganda has crept in. And so they were telling us, they're like, hey, so they tell us this whole story. We interview them. Oh man, we used to eat meat all day, every day. We would catch it in the forest, and
they think they're doing a good thing, right?
Yeah, and they're doing this whole thing and talking about how important it was to them, and then they're also telling us how the new generations aren't doing well. But then they're saying, oh, but now our doctors are telling us about saturated fat and how meat is bad for you. And I'm like, what? It's getting out to you? You're out in this village in the middle of Tanzania, and they're getting the same message that we've gotten for the past, 60 years about this bogus idea about you just eat cholesterol and it just goes into your arteries and clogs them. It's just that's not how it works.
It's kind of like we've all had our blinders on to just the painfully obvious. And if you really kind of think of food in a common sense sort of way, which is kind of what you're all about with your Sapien diet, it's kind of obvious what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. But I think one thing that was really interesting to me is that I saw a podcast with Tim Spector. I think it was on Dr. Gundry's podcast. And he was talking about Western culture, how it's very different from all these tribes, the Hadza and all this stuff. And one thing that you hear about when you Google, if you were to like Google hunter-gatherer tribes, what they ate, it says like they eat like 100 to 150 grams of fiber a day. Tim Spector said he visited the Hadza and they were eating loads and loads of fiber.
Eating a very natural, very diverse diet. And masses of fiber, supplemented with, bits of meat when they fancy it,
And I just found that contradictory to your and Mary's experience. What was your experience with kind of those tribes, their day-to-day dietary habits?
No, this is really important, and I don't want to say that I know everything about the Hadza, though.
Right.
I want to start off because actually there's a researcher named Herman Ponzer who wrote a couple books and studies the Hadza. And someone called me out and tagged him on Twitter, and now I was going to interview him, and now he doesn't want to do an interview with me anymore. He thinks that I think I know everything about the Hadza because when I visited them, they did not eat any plant foods or fiber. The men were just eating meat all day, and that's all they ate was meat. And then the women, they told us they gave the women meat, and they were eating some kind of leaf, but they only had access to this one type of leaf. It was like a pumpkin leaf, right? Like the top of the pumpkin that they got from some patch or something. So that's all I saw them eating. I saw another group eating some tubers, but they were very rough. There were a lot of roughage, right? It was just pure fibrous, like the most fibrous things ever, and they would chew on them and then spit out the fiber. So they were just extracting, basically glucose. They're just getting some starch from the tubers and then spitting out the fiber. And then, they would get some meat from the men go hunt it. In my experience, I'm not saying I'm an expert, and this is the one, there's two groups we went to, and we only spent a few days with them. That's what I saw. I mean, apparently, I read Herman Ponzer's book, and he was out there doing some things with them for extended periods, and they were gathering tons of stuff. But this is not what I saw. And yeah, I mean, they did not care about like the fallback foods, these tubers. They cared about meat and animals, and that's all they cared about and what they were after every day. And then that's what they ate. They sat around the fire and they just ate them nose to tail. They ate the brains, like I said, they ate the liver, the whole thing. They were chewing on the bones. They were getting every little bit of it. There was no time for fiber. And so in my opinion, and in my brief experience, I think that there are these huge myths going around about them, that there is this plant-based narrative. There is bias in science, and the researchers do come in with a bias, and then they, without knowing it and without trying, you don't want to. I'm biased too. Like, I think meat's healthy, and so all my stuffs are based around that. But I think I have a lot of evidence to for that. But I do have a bias. So I went there, and that's what I saw. I saw them eating meat, but I don't know, maybe secretly they were, had like oatmeal in their back pocket and I didn't see it. I don't know. I know thousands and thousands of people in the world these days that don't eat any fiber and are doing great and reversing diseases and doing all kinds of stuff. There's, a big carnivore community now doing this. So I don't think they relied on it. I mean, you have to think of year round too. There wasn't always access to these foods, and there is a dry season, and we were in the wet season and we walked around and it was amazing. It was green everywhere. It was amazing. And the guide was telling us, hey, this is a barren wasteland in the dry season.